Hello, welcome back to the Graduate Careers Fair for our sixth session of the day. This is a very interesting one, and again, like our earlier one on creative careers, one that's long overdue in a sector that's misunderstood and underrepresented, I think, when it comes to graduate careers. So delighted to welcome back O'Connor from IADT, who will be hosting the session today. And as you can see, we have a large panel here, and I'm going to let Don do the introductions. But yeah, it's all about creative networking, what it is, why you shouldn't be scared of it, but also how important it is. So plenty of practical tips and advice to come. I'll come back later on. We'll go through some questions. Please put them in the chat. And I'll see you in about 20, 25 minutes. Don, over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Rory. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And thank you to all my panelists for joining us, to Mark Erlinghauser, co-director at Cartoon Saloon, Feargal, Keenan from Black Shamrock Games, John Kelly, and product designer, John, Medtronics, and Mark Graham, lecturer, composer, podcaster, pretty much everything music. Your podcast is about the entire music industry, Mark, right? And you can see the microphone goes with it. You can see all the instrumentation in the background as well. It's great. So delighted to have you here, and delighted to be talking about this topic, actually really important, I think, particularly in this industry, in the creative industry. But I think, this really is something that crosses industries, actually. The more networking that you can do, the better, in terms of just finding out what the opportunities are that are out there. And really this kind of really digs deep into that hidden job market. And no matter what market you're in, even business, IT, 85% of jobs, 80 to 85% of jobs, folks, aren't advertised. So you really need to be delving in under the covers, because people love that kind of word of mouth thing. So look, just to start us talking about, networking and what that is, I'm going to throw that out to you guys. So what is it? What is networking? How have you used it, or what does it look like?
Well, I go in first. I think probably one of the most important things to remember in this, and I'm lucky in talking to other creatives and other musicians, people are really important. And as far as I'm concerned, networking is about people. And what we do is talking to people and setting up relationships with people. And sometimes it can be a bit difficult to forget that, especially for composers who work a lot of the time on their own, in their own studios, that they're composing for people and they're going to work with people, and actually going out and meeting people and talking to them is really important. And I know that in my own career, as well as being a musician, teaching at third level, while I was doing my master's, I was reaching out to institutions to tell them who I was and say, this is what I'm studying, this is what I'd hope to do. If ever a job arises, will you let me know? And they did. In WIT, before I graduated from my master's, they got in touch with me and said, well, there's a job coming up, somebody's going on maternity leave. And that's how I got my job. It was from reaching out and talking to people, and not just electronically. I think it's worth underlining here that it's still really, really important to make a personal connection with somebody, as well as an email and a phone call, to actually meet them and to know them and to be able to discuss something personally. One thing that I always do, if I'm sending out a single or a piece of music to, let's say, Dan Hegarty in 2FM, I won't start that conversation with Dan saying, I have a new single coming out. I'll say, were you in Waterford on your holidays? Did you get down to Dunmore? How was it? And then maybe in the third paragraph, I go, by the way, I have a single coming out. And it's that personal connection that greases the wheels. But that's what you need to establish, people and connections. And that's what networking is about from where I sit.
Okay, so that's, go ahead.
So I was just going to add, I think, kind of nowadays, it tends to be more like that you send the email first, and then maybe you might meet up with the person. But I think where more value comes is if you happen to meet that person in person first, and then then you can follow up with an email, or you can say, look, it was great to meet you and great to chat, and I'd love to keep up with what you're doing and stuff like that. So I think it is, if you can get the meet someone in person and face to face, I think the value you get there is a lot greater than what you get by just sending an email.
And I know also, sorry, go ahead, Feargal.
I was just saying, it's also about forging that kind of relationship, so that even further on down the line, as you grow and as you evolve, you may pop into someone's head because they've got you on LinkedIn, they've got you on your Instagram, something like that. They keep an eye on your ArtStation, whatever it is. they will see you growing, and as you grow and as they grow, an opportunity could come up at just the right time, and they will say, you know, actually, I've spoken to that person before. Their values, their perception of the work and stuff like that is in line with what we're looking for. That this is someone we should talk to about this opening role, or even a role we didn't know we needed, but they may actually be able to fill.
And you know what? It actually never stops. The networking never stops. Even if you're in the job and you're working with people for a year or two or longer, it never stops, because the reason all of this is so important is that when the chips are down and there's only very little time to go on the project, people need to know who they can sort of bank on as well. And so then it's like, okay, I've worked with that person, she's really nice, whatever. And that's why sometimes these roles aren't necessarily advertised. So yeah, and also generally, like, always be nice, you know, no matter if you're in the job already or before the job, because there are some rock stars out there, like rock stars in their respective fields, where they think like they can be dismissive of someone just because, you know, maybe they're really brilliant at the thing that they do. But it really is a case of like, everybody is sort of, you know, on the same level, and everybody is a person, and let's just sort of be nice to each other in that sense.
Okay, so there's some
word travels.
Yeah, and there's something about that politeness, isn't there? It's kind of like, you know, you're remembered for that, right? What you're trying to do is put yourself in people's heads, so that Mark, you are the first person that they think of when that role in WIT comes up, or Feargal, you are the first person that they think of because you've had that kind of personal relationship with them. You know, you're just trying to put yourselves in their heads, and holding on to that kind of politeness and that kindness for people is really important, even when you're at college, right? To kind of work, because these are your peers. And these are the people who are, you know, love it or like it or not. They're the ones they're going to be working with in the future. They're the ones that are going to be like maybe recommending you for certain jobs in the future. They're the people who are, you know, they're working in your sphere. Sorry, Mark, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, to underline that, earlier this year, I interviewed a producer called Sylvia Massey, and Sylvia Massey was Prince's recording engineer for 3 years, and she recorded and produced those Johnny Cash American recordings, you know, won a Grammy for her work on that with Rick Rubin. But one of the things that she told me is she believes that part of the reason she gets the work that she gets isn't purely down to her skills as an engineer, being from California. She said it's because she's a good hang, because she's a nice person. She's nice to people, and she thinks that from being nice to people and networking in that way and making their work experience with her pleasurable, it opens up other doors to her, as well as her skills in the job. She thinks that it's as important as her skills in the job.
100%, because if you think about it, the person that you work with, you have to stick with that person for the next year or two, or however long that project is. So you better get on with each other. And oftentimes in recruiting, it comes up that, look, this person is super amazing at this thing, but this person is more of a team player. And then, you know, in a lot of the times, people would go for the person that is more of a team player.
Okay, so guys, you're a graduate, you're a recent graduate, or you're just coming out, you're in your final year this year, you know, and you're wanting to kind of look forward into the end of your final year, or the end of this first year out of, you know, being graduated, and have something in place. Like, how do you start? How do you start to warm up your networks? Like, what could we give people in a tangible way? Like, these are the things, these are the steps that you need to take.
Straight away, I would say add your classmates. That is one thing that I like. Literally, it's automatic for me to say add your classmates, add people from college, because they are a network of people who have worked with you, and they are people who will be working in similar industries or pursuing similar careers. If they get in somewhere, they may remember your talents and may refer you. Straight away, you've already got that. And like, as soon as you started doing that, and you are providing, you know, recommendations on, say, LinkedIn, or reacting to people's work on their portfolio or their website or something like that. As soon as you do that, you've warmed up your network, and then you from there start looking to groups and people outside of your college group, you know, specialist interests or software aficionados, or people who are passionate about a particular industry. The social groups that spring up from that passion, you've already gotten the practice in from people that you already have worked with and know. And I think that just makes it easy.
I think, and maybe it might be kind of industrial design specific, probably not, but you know, towards my final, the end of my time in college, there were various kind of workshops that would pop up, or hackathons and stuff like that. And I think if that's stuff that you're passionate about, like definitely attend things like that, because you will get different branches of people coming from different places with different knowledge and different skill sets. And you know, networking isn't just about, you know, making connections with people in your industry either. I think it's important to kind of branch out and maybe you know, meet people from different industries as well, because oftentimes it comes around full circle, and there are benefits for both parties on stuff like that. So I would say, if I know COVID and stuff like that, it's not the easiest, and maybe events like that are probably only starting to come back, but definitely, you know, a quick Google search, you'll find different workshops, different events, and different stuff like that, where that's where you might start to meet people beyond your classmates or friends or family and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
Also, you can, just to add to this, what you can also do is team up with people that you studied with. Even like, so right now I have a colleague, I've worked with him for 2 or 3 years, but he, after college, formed a group of like-minded people, and they together came up with little bits of, you know, little scenes, little sort of special things that they then put online and made a name for themselves. And that can also work. You don't have to be a one-man army necessarily. And you can continue this on a freelance basis.
And I'd add to that as well, maybe think globally, but start locally. You know, if you are trying to establish yourself, look to where you are at the moment, your town or your city, and start to work there. And by establishing, you know, a portfolio, and by establishing a reputation and people who will vouch for you, you can do that at a very early age and at the very start. I'd say this, you were talking about when you graduate. I would suggest that this starts before you graduate. That this is in, you know, your second last year or your last year, that you're building these relationships, and maybe you're doing some work locally at that stage. So when you do graduate, you're hitting the ground running. You're not starting from when you graduate. You're doing that in your last year or your second last year before you graduate.
Yeah, and I think, like what you're saying, that the tactics that you're suggesting are really smart. It's kind of like look around at who you know now and build from there. So who do you know now, and what can you create with the people you know now, whether it's simply connecting with them, or whether there are projects that actually you could start to make personal projects on a smaller cases into the future, you know. But it is about looking around at who's there now, and then growing that exponentially.
There's a wonderful example of that. The animation series Adventure Time. They started as students. The people who made that animation, and the composers and the musicians who worked on the soundtrack for that, they started doing that in college, and it took off. But they grew in that together. And then when they finished Adventure Time, they all went into different roles in the industry through that. But that started with them while they were still studying in college, before they graduated.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know, so those kinds of things can be really, really important in terms of kind of going forward, and actually using this last year, or if it's your first year out, using this year to really get out there and start to talk to people. And you know, and I know, you know, Feargal, somebody suggested, you know, it's COVID. I think it was you, John, you know, this is difficult, but actually it's not so difficult to network right now, because people don't have to go anywhere to meet you. It's you know, they don't have to travel anywhere. They don't have to go out of where they are. They bring their coffee to their laptop, and, you know, and you're having a coffee with them, you know. So COVID has kind of brought something in terms of networking that can be much easier as well, you know, and you can meet people face to face in that regard. And when you talk about, you know, events coming back, I mean, LinkedIn is an amazing source of both events and courses, right? So, you know, one of the things that LinkedIn have added over the last couple of years is an entire events piece. So when you go to jobs and you search jobs of a certain industry, you can also search all of the events and the courses and the people and the companies and everything that's happening there. So and all of those events in San Francisco, for example, that you never would have been able to go to, are now online because of COVID. So suddenly you have the opportunity to go to them. So that can be kind of important as well.
It's a big topic with how to use social media for that, you know, because with LinkedIn for sure, because the focus there is on the professional sort of working relationship. Like on Facebook, I like to keep that sort of to friends or private, you know. So when I would say, don't just go to Facebook and add a person before you haven't spoken to them. So just to establish some sort of relationship before you hunt them down on Facebook.
So what has been the best approach, Fabian, in terms of someone hunting you down? What have you seen that, like, as that kind of really worked? You know, is it through LinkedIn that people reach people best? Is it, you know, is it through word of mouth? Is that the way you like best? Or, and I didn't mean to direct that solely at you, Fabian, actually, anybody can jump in on that, but
yeah,
just as you were there.
Well, just to answer your question, I think LinkedIn is okay. You know, people don't tend to hand out their emails readily too much. So that's one way, or through a website. There's usually a contact form on the website. And then to just be genuine when you know, just ask a genuine question about what you want to know, how to break into the industry and so on. But Feargal, you want to come in there?
No, I was just agreeing with what you were saying. Like that, those are very basic, very effective steps. Absolutely. I mean, we have seen very creative approaches in our industry, because lots of people kind of, you know, have been playing video games, particularly during the quarantine, are like, oh, I totally want to do that. But sometimes it's the simple, well-written note on a LinkedIn or an email that includes like a link to the game you designed over quarantine or something like that, and it just giving us a little bit of your personality and just introducing yourself, that opens the networking option, the dialogue. You know, it doesn't have to like be an immediate, oh, we have to hire this person. It can be something that builds a rapport so that you can, you know, maybe capitalize on it later for a prospective career option. So sorry, yeah.
Okay. So are there any other kind of any other pieces that you have done yourself in terms of kind of trying to network or trying to reach out to people that have really worked in terms, you know, is there, go Mark, you're just.
I think we're very lucky in Ireland, you know, to answer your question, to follow on from what was just being said there by Feargal and Fabian, that as well as Ireland being a very small country, we're kind of nice people here, you know, that when tourists come here, we like to talk. And what I found in the past, and I encourage students to do this as well, reach out to somebody and ask them a question, or ask if they'll have a cup of coffee with you. The worst that can happen is they won't respond. The next worst thing is they'll say no. But I find that 7 times out of 10, somebody will meet you and have a chat with you and a cup of coffee. You know, that we still have that in Ireland, where people, it's not maybe as the industries aren't as built up and there aren't as many barriers in the way. Like, you know, up to recently, you could still just walk into reception in RTE and ask to see Ryan Tubridy, and he might come out to reception and talk to you. You know, that in Ireland, we still enjoy that kind of access to people within industry. So capitalize on that and do contact people and do ask them questions, especially if you can identify the nerdier people and you're a nerd yourself. Nerds like nothing more than talking about the area that really excites them and fires them. And if you ask a question that's relevant to that area, like, you're probably going to get a response. And the worst thing that happens is that you won't. So don't let fear stop you from doing anything. You know, embrace it. And the worst that can happen is you don't get a reply.
Yeah, I think you're dead right. And I think another characteristic of our nation is that our favorite thing to talk about is ourselves. So you're pushing against an open door if you're asking about what our journey is, how we got here, you know, what's your best day, what's your worst day, and, you know, and that's informational interviewing, right? It's really trying to get your finger on the pulse of, you know, what's happening in the industry. What would you need to see in a CV, you know, in order to employ someone? That's a really good question, because that shows me, you know, what's out there and what's needed, or, you know, what are the challenges in the industry? Again, what's needed? You know, what are the key skills? And if you look up informational interviewing, if you just Google it, you can get 500 questions that you could possibly ask straight away. So you don't have to feel under pressure that, you know, that this whole conversation is on you. You have your 10 questions there. You just pick out 10, and if the conversation lulls it all, you're like, oh, I just want to make sure I'm asking you everything I wanted to ask you, because I'll be kicking myself. You know, there are simple structures that you can put in place for yourself to make this really easy, actually. And again, you're not saying get a job. You know, you're not putting anybody under pressure. You're just picking someone's brains. And that's a great way to start. If there's a job there and they like the sound of you, if you're sharing a passion with them, you're getting into a nerdy conversation, as Mark says, they'll absolutely tell you about that job.
Yeah.
Also, like, Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Fabian. Go ahead.
Oh no, just quickly do your homework where you're applying to, because the classic one is, you know, a showreel is being sent out to a studio and that studio doesn't do any of the stuff that you put on that reel. So just really tailor it to the place where you apply. That's the basic one. Yeah.
I think my point was kind of along the same lines. Something that I did was, rather than kind of go to the person who was hiring or go to the top dog, I kind of reach out to someone who's already working at the company. You know, if it's someone that I happened to come across people on Instagram that had put up some of their work and stuff like that. And so I found them on LinkedIn and asked, you know, to meet for a coffee. And they'll tell you about the company culture. They'll tell you kind of what the company looks for, what the boss is like, what the hiring manager is like, or how it would, like, you know, how you can maybe reach them, or, you know, what the best way to approach them is. So you don't necessarily always have to go for the person at the top. And I think it's also a good way of just, you know, maybe reaching out to people kind of recently graduated from college, and just to get their experience and how they got to where they are now.
Yeah. Okay.
There are also there are also
on.
open days. You know, some studios have open days. Look out for these things. But I think personally, internships are such a powerful tool to just get a foot in the door as well. So if you can avail of an internship, I would always recommend it. Like even to just see it for yourself, if that's your cup of tea, what they do there. But there is definitely a high number of people that start doing an internship, and then for 3 months you get to know the person and all the networking stuff that happens within the place, and that's what you want, like for others to get to know you. And then you know, yeah, absolutely. Like if there are any chances of internships, I would always go for that.
Okay. And so, yeah, you know, it's a great way to learn a company, and it's a great way to learn if there's fit, actually, if there's fit in terms of you and the company as well. And just before Rory, you jump in, you might have some questions there from the audience, but I just wanted to ask, you know, I know that LinkedIn is one mechanism, you know, and that kind of covers all industry, and probably if there's a mismatch in terms of the creative industry, actually, because I know that corporate are looking for loads of creatives, but a lot of creatives aren't on LinkedIn, right? So there's a real there's a miscommunication there. So that's something that we need to look at as well. But are there other online tools that are good for kind of networking?
ArtStation, Vimeo is handy for hosting reels and stuff like that. But most people don't know ArtStation has a recruitment tool attached, so you can actually make yourself open to certain opportunities using it, and you can also link your ArtStation to your LinkedIn so that you can have a rather consistent, creative LinkedIn, rather than just what people think of as this terribly dry, you know, accountancy idea. LinkedIn is a lot more diverse than I think people realize, and it's a very handy tool that allows you to connect all of your media together for a professional purpose. So we would always encourage that. Also, great way to do research on possible employers. Like, someone paid attention to like one of the many posts that I repeated from Virtuous, which was that our logo was "We make games better together," and they repeated it to me in an interview, and I knew immediately this was someone who was paying attention, that was following us, and it allows you to see what the employer is doing. It helps you do your research better as well.
Because their feed is coming across your feed. Yeah, sorry, go on, Fabian.
This is probably stating the obvious, but just make sure that all your links work. I mean, you wouldn't believe the amount of times I come across a link and it's expired or doesn't work, or there's a password or whatever, and then people won't try to Google you know, for the next 20 minutes. So really just, cover those basics.
I think one of the unfortunate answers to this question is it's never really one tool. It's kind of all of them, you know, that it's like a toolbox, and all of these communication tools are elements in our toolbox, and we use this toolbox for communication, but also for a little bit of self-promotion. And the trick is trying to self-promote on these platforms without looking like we're self-promoting, and that's part of the difficulty there. But all of them serve that purpose, you know. And I think one of the things to remember is that whatever the platform, be it LinkedIn or Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, this is your shop window. You know, if it's you know, an employer can very easily find you on one of these places, and that's your shop window. As well as interviewing somebody, they're probably going to look at one of your social media platforms, especially if you're a creative and you're posting something to all these different platforms. That's your shop window. Treat it as that, and not just for blatant self-promotion. I think somebody to look at who's really good at this is a guy called Christian Henson from Spitfire Audio. And he uses his platform in a wonderful way where he gives lessons in how to use tools. He promotes the work that he does with Spitfire Audio, but he often does this while he's walking in the mountains in Scotland. So there's another element to that as well, that they look beautiful and he's promoting the outdoors, but he really is kind of promoting what Spitfire Audio does and what his beliefs are behind that. So kind of, if you can remember all those things and tie all those platforms into that one thing and remember that employers are going to look at it, I think that's kind of important.
Great. Okay, so I think we've probably gone a little bit over, Rory, have we? And also we've probably gone a little bit away from networking in its entirety in terms of social media, but they're all important in terms of networking capabilities. So
Sure.
Do you have any questions that are coming in there?
Yeah, we have some questions here from students and and other attendees. Well, I'll break them up into, I'll ask two people one question and two people the next one, and try and get through them in the next 6 or 7 minutes. This is, and I like this because it's just so simple. I'll put this to Mark first and then Feargal. How do you network without appearing like you just want something from someone?
I think it's that thing that I was talking about. If you establish a personal connection, it's a conversation. You know, you can have a conversation and you mention in that conversation whatever it is, that thing is that, you know, let's say that you're interested in. Let's not say that you're after, you know, that you're interested in. And I think if you are really interested in that thing, that feeds a conversation. And where those conversations can often happen in relation to networking, something that is important that I didn't mention is that all of our creative industries will have some kind of conference or event or other. And these conferences and events are really good places to meet people who you will work with or who might employ you, or just people who are interested in the same things that you're interested in. And I think that's where conversations work really well and where different platforms work really well. It's just by having conversations about something that you're really interested in, and things can spark off that, I think.
Feargal?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, absolutely. The same, like, if you want to make the approach, it's easiest to try and make it in a very upfront way as well. I would say that, like, it is understood that there should be a give and take between employer and employee, between mentor and mentee. There should be, you know, it should go both ways. So there's also a case of, if you accept that, it can make it easier for you to kind of go, look, I'm really looking for an opportunity. You may not have anything right now, but if you can show them that you are interested specifically in that industry or that studio or that group or whatever, you know, it makes it a lot easier to do.
Most people are actually helpful. Most people do want to help, and they, you know, once or else nicely. Yeah,
Can I add one more thing really quickly, Rory? And I know you only were asking two people, but at the end of any one of those conversations, can you please ask, look, is there anybody else I could talk to? Is there anybody else that could give me another angle? And get two people, ask people, can you get them to give you two names? And any chance you could just warm up the network, could you email them and ask me to, you know, could they give me 10 minutes for a coffee? That's it. You know, and suddenly you have two more people to talk to, and then from those two people you have two more, and your network is growing kind of exponentially. That's it. Sorry, Rory.
No, it's okay. No, it's just last night. I was at a book launch last night, which is kind of a weird thing. You're in a pub with people, and people were kind of looking around, going, "Oh, that's what this is like again." And you can see people who didn't know each other standing near to each other and not sure how to start up conversations. And you know, we all know what these things are like. But just to John and to Fabian, if you're in those environments, and you know, a student wants to come up and talk to you, what sort of things, you know, would make you want to engage with them in terms of building their network? I mean, what sort of, is it a question? Is it, you know, what works? And I know that sounds a bit odd, but what works if someone wants to kind of be kind of an icebreaker, I suppose, in person? Because this is going to happen again. This time next year, hopefully I won't be doing this. I'll be in the RDS with 6,000 students and we'll be talking, you know, at stands. So, you know, what's a good icebreaker? Fabian, what do you first?
Well, to be honest, I would like to be approached in a genuine way. You know, if the person says, "Hey, listen, sorry, but like, could I ask you a couple of questions about how the character animation department in your studio, you know, what they're looking for?" I'd be happy to answer that. Like, it doesn't have to be like a cheesy line or anything like that, just as long as it's sincere.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think you have to come up with any like pickup lines or anything, or cheesy lines. But yeah, the like just being genuine. I think it helps if you know, like, if you're going to an event, say, and you know someone who's in your industry is going to be at it. I think maybe knowing something about the person, or, you know, asking about some piece of work that they've done, that you have an interest in, and just striking up conversation and just be as genuine as possible.
Yeah, and
You're
just
kind of
one more
standing in front
question.
of someone.
Yeah, that's great, John. Thanks very much. And I have one more question here, which someone sent in that, and I know a lot, in the creative industry, a lot of skill sets are gathered in postgrad. You know, there could be digital media or you know, music, whatever it is. It can be added on to. A lot of them are masters, postgrads, and a lot of them, obviously, the students of last year had to do this remotely, and it's such a collaborative industry. And I know you're all so passionate about working together, and obviously, I can see you're all very comfortable with how you've got through the last year in terms of. But it has been hard, I'm sure. But for students, it's particularly hard. So you have someone here who wants to start their career after career gap. So they've haven't worked for a few years. They've gone back to college. They've got this qualification, I assume, in the creative industry, and they're looking to start a network to build a career. What's the best place they could start next Monday morning, Mark?
I knew that was going to you, Mark.
Well, I'm not doing it.
I know. I knew you were. I knew you were. I had him lined up because yeah.
I think that to just start working again, you know, I've talked to many people in this situation. We were lucky enough to have an event where I reached out. I needed an ensemble. We'd compose music for an event, so I needed to form an orchestra of sorts for that event. And the violin player who I contacted hadn't picked up their violin in 16 months. So it's a real thing, you know, that people are out of practice in the real world of doing some of these things. I think you kind of have to get back on the horse as soon as you can. And even if that's not for public consumption, if you're creating something just to get back into the habit of creating something, I think that's really important to get the juices flowing. And hopefully then when you do pick up some work, the juices are flowing. You're not starting from scratch. You're not sitting down with all this pressure on you. You've been doing work. And I think it harks back to maybe, you know, what I said, start locally and think globally. Whatever our creative industry is, I bet you we could find somebody who would like our skills on a friendly basis, that we all have friends who work in this area, and maybe approaching what was mentioned earlier on is really an advantage. Your classmates. Is there somebody in your class who's working on a project? Is there some kind of group or organization or company locally who would like your services and maybe not have a lot of money to pay for it? And there's a good place to start. You know, get the ball rolling. And I've always found that, and I've done a few jobs in my life, it's always easier to get work if you're already working.
If you're working,
you know,
already.
If you're doing something. Exactly. You know, that you are creating and you're doing something, then you're kind of pushing open doors after that. It makes it a lot easier.
And that's really it, Feargal, isn't it? It's so important to do the work. Whether, listen, you may not be getting paid for it at the time, but you're at least using the skills that you've earned in college, and that in an area that you're passionate about. So you have to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, one of the key things we advise, particularly people who want to get into the gaming industry, to do is actually look to people who also want to get into the games industry: animators, level designers, voice actors, sound engineers, everything. Look to them and kind of say, do you want to do a project together? You know, I mean, you can meet these people at game jams, which we highly recommend. There's global game jam every January, for instance. And it's a great place for people to start off, because at the end of that 48 hours, you come out of it with something to add to your portfolio, and having actually learned how to work with other people in disciplines, and having made those contacts that you can turn to later and say, I really enjoyed working with you. Would you like to, you know, do another project? And
so the first thing this student should do is definitely connect with their classmates, with their people who were in the same boat with them last year. You definitely find an open channel. And I'll have literally 2 minutes left, or I will be shot this time. So Fabian, such a competitive area you work in. Any networking takeaway tips for someone breaking into animation, your sector?
Yeah, I mean, you can also, regardless of your, on top of your student mates, you can also find like-minded people on social media, and you can do something online there as well. So you know, it's a really good moment right now in animation. The industry has been growing, and lots of people are with the streamers. Content is needed everywhere, so it really is a good moment to actually just just get in there. But in terms of the networking, then again, just to get a foot in the door, I would even sometimes say, okay, is the internship paid or is it not paid? Maybe you can sort of, you can even do one that's maybe not paid for a little while, but then at least you get a foot in the door. So it's kind of like a trade-off, you know, and then once you have a foot in the door, then maybe you have more leverage to then talk money, that type of thing.
And John, in terms of the design, any takeaways for networking in that industry? Obviously, it's very broad.
Yeah, I mean, it is very broad, and you can end up in different niches and not necessarily in the broad aspect of industrial design. But I think it's just about staying connected. If you happen to get a job that's not necessarily in your industry, and you're passionate about it, that you want to continue in it, keep up the work on the side, and keep kind of reaching out to people and just keep
and build a
keep
portfolio
involved in
and put
it.
it somewhere
Exactly,
where
yeah.
people can find it.
Portfolio, exactly, and your own side projects and stuff like that. Exactly, yeah.
Okay, great. Guys, I gotta wrap it up. Thanks so much to Mark and to Feargal and to Fabian and to John and to yourself, Dawn, for pulling all this together and for sharing such a great session, and really appreciate all your time. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Brilliant
Thanks,
to have you. All
Thanks
right,
a million.
take care.
All the best.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.